Welcome to Reality Check. I'm Dave Nicholson, and this is a program where we talk to people who are making real decisions with real money, laying real reputation on the line in the field of AI. And we like to break this down by industry vertical, horizontal. We've taken a look at the software development lifecycle in financial services as an example. Also, we've taken a look at this from sort of the general counsel's perspective. What are people doing on the legal side of things? And today I'm really excited because this is a category that I think a lot of us think we understand, and that is retail. Because most of us have been in a retail establishment. And in modern times, most of us have experienced e-retailing. We've bought something online. If you haven't, you're living in a cave, obviously. Some of us have even worked in retail in our past. In fact, I sold women's couture shoes at Neiman Marcus a very, very long time ago. So again, I have a sense that I know retail, um, but I really don't. Uh, we have a guest today who really, really knows retail. Not only the history and what's going on now, but what the way forward with AI looks like. So I'd like to welcome our guest, Adam Gelnick. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be having this conversation with you.
No, I really appreciate it. I got to know Adam through a series of conversations that we had about AI in retail. And it was really fascinating for me to hear some of the kind of background on retail, especially because Adam, this isn't just his profession. He's part of a legacy that goes back generations in terms of the retail business. So I want to start out with sort of that as the foundation, Adam. Can you kind of tell us what retail used to be like in the good old times? And,
I could
you know
tell I could tell you it anecdotally. My entire career has been part of this flux moment. I guess it'll be great to start with. I work at a company called Corporation. It was started by my grandfather. Now it's run by my mother. It's about 65 years old, and we are actually, finishing up a transaction process that is going to join us with a larger infrastructure entity that's going to help us really compete the way we need to compete in the current state of the world and become more of an accessories focused business rather than just a pure play watch business. And we're really excited about that. But your point is really relevant, because I'm not just speaking from the watch category or the accessories category. And I think that it's important to make that distinction. There are a lot of different ways to understand the retail category. And, our category is definitely not as exciting anymore as perhaps apparel or athleisure or, Apple. And so I think that what I think I have the ability to kind of shed some light on is problems that are actually I guess agnostic to industry, things that everyone has experienced and will continue to experience over the course of the next, however long this disruption happens for. But as in anything, in order to understand where we are, we have to understand where we came from. So I appreciate you bringing up the history, and I think that we can fast forward to where Amazon basically comes on the scene and reestablishes what the commerce world looks like. It took a while to get where it is today, obviously, but that moment over 2 decades ago is really the ground zero for um, a major shift in a decades long process of things kind of happened and made sense in the retail category. Whether you're a wholesaler like us or you have retail shops, you had the ability to forecast your foot traffic and forecast your quarters pretty accurately. Whether in our case it was programs that would come 4 times a year, as well as replenishment and the like, and then ultimately you were able to build a business and growth profile that was pretty reliable and things that banks are comfortable with. what happened or started happening at the outset of this e-commerce transition or disruption was the customer, or let's call it the end consumer, because as a wholesaler, we look at it in two different levels, right? You have the customer who is a retailer or somebody who sells to consumers, but ultimately, you also have to be mindful of who the end consumer is. Otherwise, you won't be, selling any product, and you'll be getting all the products back from your actual customer. So fundamentally, as a wholesaler, we have these two levels of customers that we have to be concerned about. But the upshot is the same, right? You have these end consumers who are now given the opportunity to explore products that you used to be their, you know, not just primary, perhaps only resource for. And now they're seeing all of these things. They're showrooming. They're given many different ways to buy it, or options against buying the brands that you were selling them, so on and so forth. And your response can be either, how do I protect what I've have, not churn any of that business, and make sure that the thing that is my cash cow continues to be my cash cow, or the more thoughtful and forward thinking idea is recognizing how game changing this movement is, and trying to go where the puck's going to be, not where the puck is. What retail did, and this is that I've totally been reductive about what happened in this period, but I think it gives the understanding that I can now tell you that most retailers, as is indicative by where they stand today in today's marketplace, and why your Mag 7 has no retailers other than Amazon in it, right? Your outcome was that, well, they tried to protect what they had, say things like, "We don't need the e-commerce business. Our focus are the in-store people." And they took a position of, I think it's a great term, optimizing decline rather than being mindful or thoughtful about how to optimize growth. And
So let me kind of double click on that for a second because so are you describing kind of the I'm not even sure if I made the word disintermediate up. I think spell check constantly acts like I made the word up. But what I'm hearing is a situation where you used to have a more direct. I'm using you as proxy for
sure,
retail. Retailers and the wholesalers that they're working with would have a more direct relationship with the end user consumer. Amazon comes into the middle. So the current state of the art here is that Amazon is controlling, in this case, the customer experience. You're going into their virtual showroom. They're trying to upsell you, sell you to the left, sell you to the right, and you have far less influence in terms of that relationship today. So, is that a fair assessment of where we are? So, you talk about managing decline. Is that sort of a hey? We don't get a chance to shake the customer's hand and say, "Come on in, can I get you a bottle of water?" You don't
it's
have that as
very
an
true.
opportunity anymore.
It's very true, and I think that the one caveat I would say to that is our wholesale business generally didn't have a shake the hand of the customer. I do believe that, if we're gonna just take the other side for a second, the e-commerce shift in that history allowed for brands to more directly connect with end consumers and take the middleman out. The ultimate happening was a negative for department stores and um, any sort of retailer that was selling other people's brands, that didn't figure out how to think bigger about this rather than small and protective, right? And almost, and that's where you're seeing a Macy's or a Sears or I mean, Sears and Eddie Lambert's decision. And I hope it's okay that I'm shifting over to this right now,
Yeah,
but
sure.
those companies made that choice to optimize decline, which means they put leadership in place who were not merchants and were not people who could be visionary like Steve Jobs about what needs to come next. Because a, a, a positive example is Steve Jobs basically said, "I am going to make thousands of temples, and I'm stealing that term from Professor Scott Gallery, but thousands of temples to the brand across the United States with, Ron Johnson, as the head of retail. That was that was bogglingly stupid as it related to what Wall Street thought they should do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
literally,
at a time when malls were closing down and being
they were
reallocated
building
as Amazon
stores.
warehouses, yeah, Apple's
Yeah.
opening up stores. Yeah, interesting.
So I think like it's a great example of how you could have done it better, right? How you could have the whole fundamental shift is this connection with the consumer, the end consumer, like you're talking about. Wholesalers never had the ability to do that. So we had to figure out who our customers were going to be so that we could connect with those end consumers. So when Amazon disrupted the Macy's business, the Sears business, it put Toys R Us out of business, not because they were so bad, although we could get to that at another point, but Toys R Us gave over all of this stuff because we don't need to manage the e-com. Let Amazon do it for us. And there's a case study about literally that decision being the reason they're bankrupt now. And it, there are 100 examples. The most recent one being the Saks and Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf being owned by a real estate guy. They chose leadership that they were never going to help this important industry and glamorous industry shift for the long term and compete in a way that was actually going to restore. And again, it's about experience, like anything. Um, you go to these brands like Macy's because you trusted their merchants and the things that they bought as the things that I needed to buy. And at every level of retail, that was always the case. That trust is no longer there because they're running it as a bottom line business. So eh, I guess when we talk about why the history is really important, it's because okay, this industry, retail, which is super well known and super high touch for every human on the planet, is now okay, a really weary and downtrodden organism that is has no defenses to, I don't even want to say fend off AI because it's the wrong idea. You're not trying to fight AI, but literally this industry has no ability to control its destiny or the
Well, so
narrative.
so let me ask you then, because if what I'm hearing is a story of technological disruption in the sense that e-commerce comes along, disrupts brick and mortar. Again, we're both going to be guilty of reducing things to
Sure.
simple terms, but that's okay. Sometimes that's the height of genius, is being able to come up with those things. Um, that's what my wife tells me anyway.
Well,
So,
it's my
so
excuse. It's not real.
my excuse. So e-commerce comes in and disrupts brick and mortar, and the overwhelming response from brick and mortar was to essentially manage the decline at some point. Now, early on, everybody came up with, and I can't speak specifically to this, but a lot of people came up with their version of, well, we'll just do Sears.com. All we need is
Right.
a website. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. So e commerce comes in, disrupts. So you've got this weakened, really kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, just downtrodden industry that you describe as an organism. Well, now AI comes along. So the question here is this a chance for revival for any part of retail? Um,
Absolutely. I
and so
think
if it
that
is, so I want to, so let's talk about that. Not everyone is going to embrace it. And I have to
right,
say, just giving a little preview, because I know that you're engaged in exactly this, figuring out how to leverage AI, right? But I think it's
right.
hysterical. It's hysterical. Forgive me, but it is hysterical that you're going to be convincing people uh, on the board, et cetera, et cetera. And one of those people is your mother.
Yes.
so,
So
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 there's the added twist there because you've got to be
right.
really really clever about this.
Yeah, 'cause let me tell you, the minute I try to convince her of anything is the minute I'm not convincing her of anything, right? So I have to be super smart about bringing in a whole slew of important stakeholders and influencers within the organization at all levels, right? The high levels of the organization, the managerial levels, and I need them to understand, and therefore I need to clearly articulate all of the important things that I think are worth sharing, so that it's not just my voice that she hears, because, you know, she loves me as a son, but she's very objective as a leader.
This is a great case study from all
Oh, for
different.
sure.
So you got this e-commerce landscape, and a term that you used when we were talking, uh, earlier, was omnichannel.
Yes.
And so can you kind of tell us about what that sort of omnichannel concept is and how it relates to the landscape today with e-commerce and what traditional retail is up against?
Okay, so it was really interesting, as it relate a little bit back to the history, because, dot com bubble, you put anything with a dot com, that means you're doing great. You find it in all the S1s and all of the quarterly reports. It's a real important word when it literally is being replacing vernacular so that you can get Wall Street to be excited about your company. That was dot com. That was Amazon e-commerce. And even after the bust, it was still like, that was the thing. At some point, and I think it really happened with Apple making stores, and Amazon realizing that there was going to be some sort of ceiling to their connection with the consumer if it was only a digital platform, that omnichannel became the newest buzzword. Omnichannel basically says you're connecting with your customer on multiple different platforms. At that point, social wasn't as powerful or important yet. So it was really just on a commerce level of, okay, you're a digital, you have a dot com, you have warehouses, you have distribution centers, and you have retail stores if you're, in that business or whatever. And all of those different things interact with one another to create a more seamless experience for the consumer. Amazon had a mu it's funny because when that became the new buzzword, you would think like Amazon's important in that, but they are so much less important than a company like Walmart, who literally had something that Amazon was desperate to have, which they spent billions of dollars in buying Whole Foods, for, is the actual, resident area locations where they can connect with the consumers and potentially take inventory and, more easily, satisfy consumers' wants and needs. That hasn't manifested in the perfect way. It's definitely made them a stronger omni-channel player. But if you were going to talk about the pinnacle omni-channel player right now, it's got to be Walmart. What they've done with all of their systems, they bought Jet.com. Let's call it an acquihire, where they wanted the intellectual capital that Jet.com had, and that really leapfrogged them over the competition and brought them into a much more competitive landscape on the tech front and the logistics front. But they, in and of itself, wrote the book on logistics and making, the most out of your distribution centers and your stores, and, or most efficient way to ship things and freight. They are the be all and end all in
How
that
about
in that category.
Adam, how about Costco? What about Costco?
Okay, Costco is a great example of um, a customer-minded company who, the fewer stores, um, certain type of business, their margin profile is different than a Walmart profile. It's a membership subscription model. Nobody treats their customers better. No customer wants to shop in a store more than the Costco customers. I would say that their omni-channel efforts have not compared to Walmart's, because they're not they don't need it. They have people, their members are excited to come into the stores, and they don't want to change that. I don't know how that plays out in the future, but their stock price indicates that it doesn't need to change right now.
Okay, but they do have
Walmart, on
cost
the
they do have cost there is Costco.com, but
There
as
is,
a
and so it
purely anecdotally, the reason why I ask it, just the other day while at Costco, I noticed on my membership that it shows that we've been a member for 32 years,
that's amazing.
which
I'm
is
not
crazy.
I haven't been, but as long as I could be, I have been.
Yeah, and so okay, so but another example of so I mean, clearly they 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 have an e-commerce arm, but not integrated, not the way that, like,
Yeah.
Walmart.
And
Okay.
I could actually talk about it from both levels because we sell to Costco, we sell to Costco.com, and I also purchase from Costco and purchase from Costco.com. Generally speaking, you don't have the same assortment on the .com website. You don't have the idea where, you buy something in store, but you it's not in store, they'll ship it to you. Like, they haven't
Okay.
prioritize that omni-channel thing. You go into a Walmart, and if they don't have it in store, they're going to find it either in another store or in a warehouse, and they're going to be able to ship it to you. And that's just one example of how the omni-channel idea is working and making use of slow-moving inventory in one location, one store in Texas that is going to be able to support avoiding a lost sale in New York, and in doing it right. Converting that sale is the second most important thing. Doing it in a way that doesn't make it not profitable is the most important thing. And Walmart has became an is an expert in logistics and has become over the course of this past 2 decades an expert in that.
Okay, so and that's crowded out a lot of small, local retailers as an example.
Sure.
It's really tough.
Walmart was the original, right?
Yeah, Walmart's the original, and then the irony of, I've had this conversation over the years, the irony of small businesses that are in the retail space using Amazon Web Services for things,
Isn't that
which
ironic?
actively subsidizing the retail side. So you're basically you're making a deal with the devil at that point.
Right.
Not a good thing. So here we are. There's this thing called artificial intelligence. Of course, you know that AI has been around for a while with machine learning and deep learning neural networks and all of that. Um, but where we sit here in 2026, what are you thinking AI can do for you? What are you looking into? And not just for your business because it has some particular
Right.
features, but broadly within the kind of wholesale retail market. So tell us about the way forward with AI.
Right. I'm going to start with something I said earlier just to connect everything. For the past 2 decades, we've optimized the decline, or these companies, I should say, have optimized the decline. Now, with AI and with these tools that are being developed daily, you have the opportunity to optimize growth. The question, though, is whether leadership structures can evolve fast enough to determine which tools should be deployed and how to properly use them. And I think that when you frame the conversation in that light, you put a lot of the onus on your management teams and your leadership teams. And that's where it belongs because the framework is not yet set as to how this is going to work industry to industry, company to company. I think that the answer to your question is it's t- it, it's the most important time, and it goes back to an earlier point you made, which is this you know a revitalization moment? Is this an opportunity for the downtrodden to rise up and finally move and change their stars a little bit? And the answer is yes for the companies that are willing to say we we understand that the way we did things is not going to be the way we're doing them in the future. And on the simplest, smallest level, I think Google has shown uh, an incredible amount of foresight and really guidance and leadership in saying we're going to optimize for engine optimization, generative engine optimization, I should say, and even if that starts to churn our most important business, which is search, it doesn't matter because as long as I'm going to be leading in that, everything else is going to fall into place the way it is. And when you think about the ecosystems that exist for generative AI right now, and I'm getting a little bit on a tangent. We could come back to retail in a second. Google has figured out how to, I think, do what Microsoft did on the enterprise business level, which is, or Apple did in their ecosystem with their hardware, is that we have the ecosystem for everything that you need in AI. They now have the Nano Banana. They have Gemini is at least if not as good, better than the chat GPTs of the world. They're integrated into your important email servers and drive. They figured out that piece where I don't think standalone companies are going to be able to compete as well. And Copilot's not really as good a product as these guys,
Well,
but
wait, what standalone companies? What do you mean by
like,
that?
when you think about the AI bots, right, the chat bots,
Yeah,
you I and I learned this from the course that I was fortunate to do with you, but it's you have the Geminis, you have the Chat GPTs, you have the Claudes, and then, Copilot is kind of, there. Those are all pretty similar working tools, right? Then you have other programs that you could talk more explicitly about it. But as I look at the landscape of those and seeing it from an organizational standpoint, and this is how I want to kind of bring us back to where we were. It's like,
yeah.
okay, your organization works with Microsoft. You're probably going to end up working with Copilot, even if it's not the best tool right now, because again, it's all embodied. It's a closed network. You're worried about certain, I- I- integrations and stuff like that. Google has that with lots of companies who use Google for a variety of different things. So that's why I think, and then you add in all the things that they're doing, building their own chips and the general know-how within AI that they've already learned and done over the years with their search product. I think it's become a much more,
Okay,
um,
okay. So you're talking about the vertical integration that
yeah,
Google has compared to like an OpenAI as an
yes,
example. Okay, okay, okay. Just wanted to be clear. Now, where does so uh it's interesting because it's an age-old story of um those who fail tend to do too much trying to avoid cannibalization. They're
yes,
if your biggest concern is we don't want to lose the business we already have, unfortunately, you lose all of the business that you would have had otherwise, and then you lose
right.
the business that you have also.
Right,
So,
defending
yeah,
the
so
lead, right?
yeah,
I like sports analogies, right? So, like,
yeah,
you're playing hockey and you have a lead of 1 or 2 nothing, and, like, if you're not continuing to try and score, you'll ultimately lose that lead, right?
yeah. So, okay, so now back to retail. How does this play out
So
organizationally and then, kind of at the tactical level with things that maybe you're looking at that have caught your attention?
right, so I think that the companies that can benefit from it are the ones that, get out of the mindset of, you know we're just trying to reduce bottom line costs or operating expenses and improve bottom line profits and change their mindset to say, what will make us a, you know, a formidable competitor in the future? What's going to have us leapfrog from this tough place that we're in into a place that, you know, end consumers are excited to be interacting with us again? And the answer is in any of these AI tools, but it's not in them in piecemeal, and it's not in them in let's throw mud at a wall and see what sticks. The answer is actually in really holistic consideration around the problems that or the bottlenecks in within your organization, and then saying, okay, what's going to really solve those problems? What tools are out there to possibly do that? And really to move quickly on those decisions. I think that one of the things that really stuck with me as it relates to the coursework that I did with you was this idea of really putting a group together of um, incentively aligned people with many different inputs, with many different skills and expertise, because this isn't going to be solved by one visionary CEO, right? There's no way that he or she can understand all the different limitations, both on the positive and the negative side, right? You could say, I'm going to use this AI tool because it's going to make my sales team, like Superman, but somehow that's gonna totally erode the logistics capacity that you did. I don't know exactly how that works, but you have these you need all of these voices in the same room to make sure that you have thought through all of the things. And then you also need a really strong and visionary leader who's able to stop the conversation at the point that it needs to be stopped so that it doesn't die in, deliberation at the
And you're
same time.
speaking
So
you're speaking from direct experience of going out
absolutely.
and looking at the point solutions, and I know that you found some that are actually attractive
Yeah.
and
I mean,
exciting.
there's a list of things that we were exposed to in the coursework and things that I've seen over the course of my own professional work. But um, the one that I wanted to talk about was this company called Pattern out of Utah. Um, they are brilliant, brilliant people. IQ's well above mine. In a sentence, I think what they've really done is engross themselves in the world of Amazon retail specifically, but e-commerce and marketplace retail at large. And they've said, where are these pain points? And at each point, either they've acquired a company to improve their tech, or they built their own stuff to do it. And they've in such a um, effective and clearly explainable way, they've taken a black box of a business and uh, figured out a way to deliver um, all of that AI need um, at each of the different layers of either the customer life cycle or the product development life cycle, and everywhere in between, as it relates to the administrative work that goes into it. And they've created a way for you to scale your business um, at less infrastructure costs. And when to go into each of the modules or the things that um, i- i- uh, they do would you have to go out there for a few hours and really understand it. But we're right now, and let's get a little technical on the Amazon side. We're right now an Amazon 1P vendor, a first party vendor. They, like any wholesale business, they buy product from us, they warehouse it, and then they ship it to the end consumer. What Pattern did is they mastered marketplace, which is the Amazon third party business. They take product as a wholesale customer from people like us, and they manage it from the logistics side, all using AI forecasting and very, very state of the art type of machinery and equipment to make sure that they're getting bottom dollar cost on that fulfillment, while also making sure speed and reliability is exactly where it needs to be for an Amazon business. And then they, alongside you, on the Amazon Marketplace platform, market and iterate and test and do marketing campaigns and discount promotions and work together with you to create that business that you were doing on 1P beforehand, but now you don't have to, pay Amazon these incredible fees to do that. They pay Amazon the third party fee, and they figured out how to mitigate the costs enough so that they can make money and the wholesaler ultimately can make more money and more volume in a more healthy way.
Okay, so there was a point in time when Amazon said, "Hey, why are we giving so much money to UPS to deliver our packages? What if we bought vehicles and airplanes, at least strategically, to mop up more margins and cut these sort of intermediaries out where we can." So you're saying that AI is allowing people
So
to do that
it's a
now?
really interesting analogy because I think that the one thing I want to share is I don't think Amazon obviously cares in some way about margins and profits. I have those conversations with them. They're like any retail, but they care differently. When they were growing, it was said that anytime Amazon reported a profit, someone got fired. Why? Because they didn't have to. Their stock price went up when they were losing money. So any dollar that went to the bottom line was money they didn't spend on development, on something, whether it was Prime membership or building out
Right.
Prime Studios. So like Amazon looks at profit differently and margin differently than every other company on the planet because they can, not because any other company doesn't want that same latitude and ability to do that. I bring that up because I think their first and foremost concern when it was connected to the decision to bring on trucks and planes and really steal business from UPS and FedEx was because they can, and because they want as little in between them and the end consumer as possible. Because long term, it
Right.
anyone who's on there or whose rails they have to go on is an impediment to their ultimate profit or their ultimate goals. They claim that that's customer satisfaction, but really it's a mask for the fact that it's just good business sense to want to
Sure.
control your destiny. That's really important because what's really interesting about this development, so Pattern is the largest third party seller on Amazon. They were at 2 billion in gross merchandise volume. They are now probably closer to 3 billion if I had to guess. This was, last year. That's a really interesting thing because yes, Pattern is a in between business between them and their consumer and them and vendors. But if you take the same logic that we were just talking about before, how to maximize their profits, but not necessarily in the most obvious way, if they feel that Pattern is doing a good enough job managing their customers, and they are, and now Amazon does not need to have a vendor manager staff to manage pain in the neck vendors like myself, who may or may not be doing what they're supposed to do. They lose that whatever percentages we've been handling over, but they get a basically toll road 16% from Pattern's $3 billion. So the more things that they can roll over to them, they have, they've fired 45,000 people of late. I believe that one of the canaries in the coal mine around that is an experience we had recently where the marketing group at Amazon said, "We're it was they broke up with us, right? It was the not it's not you, it's me line. It was us. Why was it us? We're not big enough. We don't spend enough money through their group, so now we either need to do it on our own or we need to find an agency to go out and do it." Well, guess what? That's an
And
example
just to
of
be clear, and just to be just for by
sure.
way of scale, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in business. We're talking about
Millions,
yeah, millions.
tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. So,
yeah, yeah.
I believe the canary in the coal mine is they're gonna do this across all of their platform where they basically say, "What do we need to be doing? What human capital do we actually need here? Where do we wanna deploy those resources? And what can AI do, instead?" And when a company like Pattern, who deploys AI as their tool for, you know, benefiting everyone really, right? They make it a better business for everybody, Amazon included. And now Amazon doesn't have to employ, you know, a bunch of small business vendor managers for small businesses like ours. Well, they could focus on the Nikes and the Philips and, that's where they wanna spend their time anyway. That makes more that's, I guess, more bang for their buck and worth the squeeze in terms of the juice.
So, okay, so it's interesting because, there's Amazon and there's Amazon Web Services, obviously, and some
Right.
people conflate them, in error. Um, but those companies that are selling AI are often being asked, "Okay, well, are you leveraging AI in a way that proves that we should be buying what you're selling?" And if I'm hearing this correctly, it's really interesting because this is an example of Amazon optimizing its business, having a third party optimize its business with AI. It's not Amazon people. It's not an Amazon engineer, vibe coding, or using OpenClaw to do something. This is a third party that is creating optimization that allows Amazon, sadly, hey, it's the way of the world, to let
Yeah.
people go, and the net result is efficiency that's good for you. It's good for this Pattern company, and it's
Yeah.
good for Amazon. At least Amazon is judging it to be that at this point. Um,
Yeah, I think that they, don't listen to what they say, listen to what they do, right? I
yeah.
think that that's what you're hearing here, right? You speak to a vendor manager and you don't get any of this indication. You speak to people like me and and the interactions that I'm having and what we're seeing, from our conversations with a company like Pattern. It's exactly that, and I think that the most important distinction there is it's not Amazon won't view this as outsourcing optimization, even though that's what it is. They're reducing a risk. Their inventory positions are, a risk by all standards, Wall Street standards, cash flow standards, their own management metric standards. So by reducing, it's not just about reducing the cost of the employees, which is definitely something that they're thinking about, or I would say it's probably repurposing, right? I think that they're not not hiring, they're just not hiring for these positions, and they're reallocating those assets.
Reallocation of capital, yeah, investing
Yeah.
in other things, yeah.
Right, and that's where the AWS versus the retail side comes into play, and all the other organizations or divisions that they have, they're ultimately, they all run up to one company. So, Andy Jassy at the top really doesn't care where the profit comes from or where the growth comes from, as long as the growth is what he expects it or needs it to be, on the whole. So he's happy to repurpose at resource allocation from, vendor managers in the retail side and buy more data centers so he can, or more NVIDIA chips so that he can, do AWS better and make more of a toll road there. So I think that that's hard for, I guess it's hard for retailers to fully appreciate that their business is really just insignificant relative to the whole. So things can shift, in a nanosecond because of, decisions that are beyond the scope of, their day to day, which makes all the difference in the world to companies like us, and certainly the P&Ls and open to buy product that these vendor managers have. Back to the point about um, understanding where these um, I guess, vendor managers' heads are at, or why I think that pattern is not really a threat to Amazon in any way. They're propping them up. They they basically reduce risk, reduce cash flow obligation, and turn it into a toll road of a business, and all that business is still happening on their platform. Exactly what their ultimate goal is, to make sure that the Amazon customer stays on the Amazon website. I mean, that is it. And so when we think about this, right? I'm now in consideration for moving my business from 1P to 3P. That's going to be a not great thing for the vendor manager losing a brand potentially if it happens. But Amazon loses nothing.
Okay, so that's an example of from your perspective, um, your responsibility to not only, make sure that you're doing the best for your firm, your business moving forward, um, but for a family legacy. No pressure, Adam. But so that's an example, and you talked a lot about pattern and what they do, and it's a fascinating case study in how AI finds its way into the value chain in kind of indirect ways. It's not, we bought this AI tool, we're now running this tool, it optimized this thing for us in our business. It's like, no, it's complex interactions. So that, let's call that the sort of tactical space. You mentioned something at the outset, though, about how critical it is to have more of a leadership mindset that isn't just focused on one point solution. The question I have for you is, well, what about the vendors out there who believe that, well, wait a minute, Adam. Yeah, we think pattern is great too. And we do something that's kind of like that, that we think can deliver you and your firm equal value. And we'd like to talk to you about it. How do you set your organization up to be able to be open to those things and evaluate them and then maybe integrate them over time? What does that
That's
look
a
like? So what does this council of elders look like?
It's a
My
really good
my turn.
question, and I think um, the first thing is a framework for that council of elders. Let's call them, just for purposes of our fun conversation here.
And they could be
Um,
youngsters. They could be
yeah,
youngsters too, right? It's AI.
yeah, I think that everybody needs on this board would need to at least subscribe to the idea that experience leads to wisdom and wisdom leads to good decision making. So if you want to be on this board,
Fair enough.
that's a mindset you have to have. Um, I think that it's important to start with the framework, which is you need to have a variety of different expertise and voices, in the conversation, and where maybe your organization doesn't have that, you need to get it from the outside. As an example would be, our organization is very homegrown, lots of different great people within the organization who know a lot about what we do. We definitely, on this, you would need an outside advisor who understands, how another category works, or, has done things in tech that, will bring an important level of insight and expertise to the table. That's like just one example of how that could work. But as important as the different voices and the different expertise is, like the the leadership role of somebody who is wise enough to know when the conversation needs to be prolonged, and when the you know uh, conscious discourse is good and healthy, and when a decision needs to be made, and everyone needs to subscribe ultimately, regardless of your position on what that decision is. Everyone needs to, I think Jeff Bezos says it best, disagree and commit, right? And I think that mindset is going to be super important for any organization that wants to make these types of big decisions. Now, I will also say, in these boards and in the organizational framework in general, you definitely need to have room for small mini trials, right? That aren't, as big and widespread. They need to fit within the almost like a vision statement or mission statement for this disruption and this flux. And maybe something should be drafted that, puts that, in a concrete form, where you understand that things are changing, and this is, we're going to do this together, but whatever happens tomorrow, we know it's going to be different than it is today. And
Yeah,
that understanding, you create an opportunity to be nimble enough to activate on the smaller opportunities to test, and maybe that pushes you in a different direction. And maybe pattern is no longer um, the right path or the right tool for us to be using. That's where this group needs to make sure that you know, it's like any good investment, right? You're sitting there and you're sitting on it. It's been great for so long. You still need to, and this is where my portfolio management, mindset comes in. You still need to pressure test it, right? Just because it was good 5 years ago doesn't mean it's going to have the same earnings capacity down the road, or the same dividend capacity that you've always counted on. So in order to not get stuck in a comfortable, complacent position, you always need to be pressure testing that. Now, decisions like pattern are much larger and more difficult to unwind than perhaps trying a new tool that is able to generate videos, for your marketing campaigns.
yeah. Well,
Understanding that also is helpful in your discussions within this, council of elders, where, okay, if we do want to consider changing from pattern or from some big decision that was holistic and widespread, well, here's what that's going to cost us, whatever that looks like, time,
and
money.
and the council of elders has to be willing to understand that there's going to be a blank space in the agenda, a month or 2 from now for something that hasn't happened yet.
Right.
Something
I
doesn't
love
exist.
that. Yeah, we talked about that. That
And
was
so
I think that's really, really smart, almost like, on your calendar.
yeah, we, kind of welcoming a new cohort of folks in the program you referenced, at Wharton. I made the point to let everyone know that the most exciting session we would have would be on the subject of something that has not yet happened. And so
Ye
on that note, Adam, we're gonna have to have you come back, at a future date, and what we're gonna talk about is something that hasn't happened yet, that is
I'm
a
really excited
meaning
about that.
it will be a meaningful development that will change the way that you look at how AI can help you in the retail space, and we don't know what that is going to be yet, but when it happens, we'll have you come back. I wanna thank you for spending this time. This has been great. We could,
Thank you so much for having
we
me.
could spend
You know,
hours more on this, and we will in the future, but, thanks again, Adam, for being
I'm
here.
looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
And for Reality Check, I'm Dave Nicholson. stay tuned to this. It's just going to get better and better and better. I mean, look at this. Look at this smart person that we had a chance to talk to about this subject. This is really going to be exciting moving forward. Thanks for tuning in.